Hi. We were supposed to grab lunch. Instead, she parked in front of a beige brick building with sand-colored blinds and a cracked sign that read, Family Insight Counseling. No explanation, no warning. She cut the engine, turned to me with a smile so practiced it made my teeth itch, and said, I booked us a therapist. Just for you. Just for me. She said it like she was giving me a birthday gift, like therapy was a bow-wrapped apology for something I did. She didn't wait for a response, just got out, adjusted her blouse in the window's reflection, and walked toward the entrance like this was all perfectly normal. Like springing mental health interventions on your husband without consent was just a cute surprise. Inside, the walls were painted that non-committal shade of taupe that offices love, though calming. The air smelled like carpet cleaner and diffused eucalyptus. I was still trying to process what was happening when the therapist appeared. Mid-40s, wire-rimmed glasses, flat shoes, clipboard tucked to her chest like it held my future. Hi, I'm Marlene, she said, smiling like she already knew everything. Let's sit and talk, okay? We sat. Not across from her, next to each other, on a couch designed for détente. I could feel the tension buzzing off my wife like a soft electric current. She crossed her legs at the knee, rested her hands gently in her lap, and exhaled as if finally, someone else could carry the burden of fixing me. Marlene opened with something soft. So, what brings us here today? I hadn't said a word yet when my wife answered. Her voice was delicate, concerned, just the right edge of exhausted to sell the role. He's been hard to talk to. His tone's been difficult. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells lately. Eggshells, lately. She said it like it was new. Like she hadn't already been pulling away for months in 1,000 subtle, deniable ways. Marlene turned to me, nodding sympathetically. Do you recognize that dynamic? Where someone's tone makes the other feel unsafe expressing themselves? I stared at her, then at my wife. Her eyes didn't meet mine. They weren't asking questions to understand me. They were collecting data to define me. Over the next 50 minutes, I became a set of symptoms. Emotional dysregulation, patterned withdrawal, repressed hostility masked as silence. Every word was an accusation dressed up in academic neutrality. Marlene spoke like she was reading a diagnosis from a manual, and my wife offered gentle confirmations. Yes, that's what I've been saying. That's exactly it. I watched them pass my personality back and forth like a case file. What hit hardest wasn't the content. It was the performance. My wife had rehearsed for this. She had her lines down, her timing. Even the emotional texture of her voice was calibrated. It was the difference between someone sharing pain and someone reciting it for effect. The moment I knew I'd been ambushed was subtle but final. Marlene said, There's often a correlation between difficulty processing emotion and early attachment fractures. Did either of your parents struggle with that? My wife's eyes flicked to mine. A beat too fast, too prepared. She told Marlene about my father. That wasn't therapy. That was strategy disguised as care. I didn't argue. Didn't raise my voice. I listened, nodded, answered politely. I wasn't about to give them what they wanted. A crack, a raised tone, something they could circle on a clipboard. By the end, Marlene smiled like we'd made progress. My wife held my hand in the hallway. You were brave, she whispered. That night, she made pasta, put on soft music, tried to lean her head against my shoulder like she hadn't just sold my personality to a stranger. And all I could hear were her words from earlier. His tone's been difficult. I laid in bed beside her still, eyes open to the ceiling fan spinning above. And I knew she didn't come up with this alone. This wasn't concern. This was choreography. Somewhere in that building, behind that clipboard, was a plan. And I'd just walked into the first scene. The shift wasn't loud. It didn't come with slamming doors or screaming matches. It came in word choices. A week after the therapy ambush, she told me I was invalidating her emotional landscape. I just asked if she could tell me what was wrong instead of walking around the house like a ghost. That was my crime. And suddenly I was a threat to her psychological ecosystem. She used to say I was closed off or distant when we argued. Real words, human words. Now it was emotional dysregulation, trauma projections, and toxic fixations, phrases that didn't come from her life. They came from someone else's glossary. She wasn't speaking to me anymore. She was filing a report with every sentence. That's when I noticed the manila folders in her office. She worked from home 2 days a week, liked to spread out in the guest bedroom. Normally neat, But lately she'd been leaving things open, maybe too comfortable in the growing distance between us. One morning, she left in a rush. I was looking for my spare charger and saw it, a thick folder labeled Journal Copies. That word copies caught me. Not journal copies, as in premeditated duplications. I flipped it open. Inside were notes. Not feelings, not entries. Notes. Written in third person. Bullet pointed. Methodical. Maintain neutral tone. Remain composed. Record effect. Redirect blame if conflict arises. I froze. My heart didn't race, it dropped. A cold, dead weight in my chest. This wasn't therapeutic exploration. This was scripting. There were date-stamped entries. Little notations like, May 12th, argument over dish soap. He raised voice. Appeared agitated. Possible gaslighting attempt. May 16th, he didn't respond to I feel unsafe comment. Reaffirm pattern. 6/01. Therapy language reintroduction successful. No resistance. That one made me want to laugh, or scream, or walk out and never come back. Instead, I closed the folder and put it back exactly where I found it. That night, she asked if I wanted to watch a show we used to love, brought me tea, rested her hand lightly on my thigh. I didn't pull away. I didn't speak. I just watched her as she watched the screen, pretending everything between us was still warm. That's when I started documenting. I bought a leather-bound notebook. No tech. No digital trail. I wrote down everything, what she said when she said it, how she said it. I noted her tone, mine, who initiated contact, what triggered what. I dated every page, labeled every quote. Not for revenge. For defense. Because I didn't know what story she was building, but I knew I wasn't the author anymore. I was a character being written into a version of events where she was already the victim. She started dressing differently around the same time. Softer fabrics, more silk, subtler makeup. A scent I didn't recognize, musky, expensive, unfamiliar. She started taking longer to get ready, even on days she didn't leave the house. Her laptop was always angled away from me. Her phone never left her side. She flinched once when I touched her back while she was cooking. Just a light touch, nothing more than I'd done 100 times. She turned startled, then smiled too fast. I didn't hear you behind me. But she had. I knew she had. I logged it in the journal. Late one evening, she left her tote bag by the stairs. A birthday card fell out. Unmarked envelope. Thick paper. Fancy. It wasn't addressed to her. It was addressed from her. To someone named L. Inside, in her handwriting. Last weekend changed everything. Still feeling you under my skin. I didn't react. I put it back in her bag. Sat in the dark living room for a long time, staring at the hallway light she'd left on. She didn't ask me to turn it off when she passed by. I think she thought I was asleep. She kissed the air beside my head and whispered, "Good night." I didn't move. She climbed the stairs and closed the bedroom door softly, as if she didn't want to wake someone she'd already begun forgetting. I stopped asking questions. That was the first move. Not out of fear. Out of precision. I didn't want another soft accusation, another therapy phrase turned weapon. I didn't want to feed her narrative, whatever it was becoming. So I stopped reacting. I became calm. Still. Controlled. A mirror with no reflection. And that's when the patterns started standing out. She began coming home with a different scent. Subtle, but consistent. Less floral, more masculine. It clung to her jacket, lingered in her scarf, settled on the seatbelt like a fingerprint she didn't think I'd notice. She told me she switched gyms. The old one didn't feel aligned anymore, she said. She said aligned? Like a lifestyle brand. Like a script. And I nodded. Didn't ask which gym? Didn't ask who recommended it. 2 weeks later, she bought new lingerie. Laid it across the bed like it was nothing. Bold colors. Styles she hadn't worn for me in years. When I asked about it, she said she was reconnecting with her sensuality. That's how she phrased it. Like it was a solo journey. That night, I touched her shoulder in the kitchen. Just a casual brush, the way I always had. She flinched, quickly, instinctively. Like I'd broken a rule I hadn't been told existed. Like I'd broken a rule she hadn't told me about. I logged it. No tech. Just ink, paper, discipline. I noted everything. Changes in schedule. Her sudden interest in long walks after dinner. New passwords on her devices. An uptick in vague late-night emails with subject lines like, "Follow up," or, "Still thinking about it." I didn't snoop. I observed. That was the difference. Snoopers get sloppy. Observers get proof. The card from L still echoed in my mind. Still feeling you under my skin. It was a line you don't write unless something irreversible has happened. It wasn't flirtation. It was aftermath. I needed to know who L was. The answer came from nowhere. Our junk drawer. I was looking for batteries. Found an old business card, slid between expired coupons and random receipts. It had her handwriting on the back. So smart. Charisma X10. Lunch? The front read, Liam Hartwell. Organizational consultant, public speaker, phone, email, LinkedIn. I remembered him. Barely. We'd met once at a mutual friend's launch party. He'd shaken my hand like he was doing me a favor, looked me in the eye like he already knew the end of a conversation I hadn't started yet. I ran the name through my head, felt it settle. L. That night I cooked dinner. Nothing elaborate, just enough to pretend. Set the table. Poured her wine. She came in from her walk, hair tied back, cheeks a little too flushed for the weather. She kissed my cheek, sat down, smiled like the camera was rolling. We ate like strangers pretending not to be. Her phone buzzed twice. She ignored it but didn't silence it. The second buzz came with a glance she thought I didn't see. I kept smiling, nodded along as she talked about her podcast rotation and her new meditation app. She asked how my work was going. I said, steady. She said, that's good. Stability is a gift. I said, it is. Especially when you know who's standing on it with you. She didn't respond, just blinked, sipped wine. That night, I kissed her goodnight. The next morning, I made coffee and started reviewing our financial statements. Nothing digital, just paper. Things I hadn't looked at closely in years. Bank mail, old tax folders, her quarterly spending breakdowns. And I found it. An account I didn't recognize opened under a maiden name variant. Not illegal. Not even hidden. Just quietly placed where I'd never thought to look. The balance wasn't large, but the deposits were regular. Someone was planning an exit, and they weren't planning to take me with them. The unraveling didn't come from her. It came from a mutual friend, Lena, over cocktails and convenience. We hadn't seen Lena in months, maybe longer. But she reached out suddenly, wanted to catch up. Said she missed our old dinner parties, the ones before things got all, well, you know. I didn't, but I agreed. We met at a quiet bar downtown. The kind with dim lighting and overpriced gin. Lena ordered a martini. I stuck with club soda. I needed clarity, not comfort. She leaned in halfway through the drink, smiling like she was letting me in on a joke I didn't know I was part of. So how are you guys handling the whole poly boundaries thing? I stared at her. The what? I asked. She tilted her head, confused for just a beat too long. I mean, she didn't tell you. She blinked, looked away. Sorry. I thought it was open now. Like trial phase or something? Trial phase. Polyboundaries. These weren't words that existed in our relationship. Not once. Not ever. I didn't react. I just took a sip, smiled thinly, and said, we're still figuring things out. She nodded, relieved. That makes sense. She's been trying so hard to be gentle about it. Gentle. When I got home, I kissed my wife on the temple and told her Lena said hello. She didn't flinch. Just smiled. Said, I need to text her back. I waited until she left for the gym. New gym, new routine, same vague return time. Then I went back to the junk drawer and pulled out Liam Hartwell's business card again. Searched for his name on my work laptop, just enough to get a bio. Consultant. Public speaker. TED Talk veteran. Specializes in narrative leadership and relationship systems coaching. The kind of man who says things like radical truth and emotional accountability. In rooms full of people desperate to be told how to live better lives, his Instagram was curated within an inch of its soul. Soft lighting, open collars, pithy quotes about boundaries. One video caught my eye. A Q&A from 6 months ago. He mentioned being in the process of consciously shifting a long-term connection. His tone was reverent, grateful, pained. The top comment, whoever she is, she's lucky to have your truth. A reply from a familiar handle, she's lucky I know it. My wife's handle. I closed the laptop. That night I made salmon, her favorite, set the table, lit candles, poured her the good wine we'd been saving. She walked in, surprised. What's the occasion? I shrugged. Just felt like it. We ate slowly. She was extra affectionate. Maybe guilt made her generous. Or maybe this was her trying to smooth the surface again. She laughed at something I said, reached across the table, touched my wrist. Her eyes were bright. And I knew. I'd never asked her to tell me the truth. I didn't need her version of it. I'd seen enough. From that night forward, I started locking down my access, changed my passwords, moved money quietly, removed her name from future planning documents. Not out of anger, out of strategy. I didn't know how long she thought she had before whatever plan she'd constructed came into play. But I knew something she didn't. I'd already begun sealing the exits she thought were hers. The envelope wasn't hidden well, just carelessly. That told me she thought I wouldn't look. Or maybe she believed I'd stopped looking altogether. In a way, she was right. I wasn't looking for hope anymore. I was looking for leverage. It was tucked behind old towels in the linen closet. A manila envelope, slightly bent, bulging just enough to catch my eye as I grabbed a spare sheet set. It wasn't labeled. Didn't need to be. Inside were copies of bank statements I'd never seen. Accounts opened under her name only. Short-term savings, mid-sized transfers from our joint account spaced just wide enough apart to avoid scrutiny. The total wasn't staggering. But the pattern was. She wasn't just preparing to leave. She was planning to leave cleanly. Tucked behind the statements was a 3-page document, typed, headed, Preliminary Separation Considerations, dated 3 months ago. Not written by a lawyer, written by her. Bullet points, labeled phases. Phase 1, Narrative Softening. Establish Emotional Exhaustion Timeline. Increase Documentation of Conflict, Private Journal. Begin referencing therapy as for us while subtly shifting focus to his behavior. Phase 2, Asset Division Prep. Begin untangling shared finances under the guise of simplification. Re-establish independence gym, car, social ties. Control emotional framing before legal steps. My name wasn't mentioned once, but I was all over those pages. I sat on the floor, back against the hallway wall, holding her timeline like it was a farewell letter drafted in my name. Then I saw the notebook again, her journal. I hadn't touched it since the first time. I hadn't needed to. But now I did. This time I read deeper. I found quotes. Direct quotes from me. Words I remember saying in frustration or fatigue, stripped of context and weaponized like evidence in a trial I didn't know was underway. I don't know how to talk to you when you twist everything I say. You keep rewriting history. You want control, not partnership. Each was followed by her interpretation. Gaslighting. Aggressive defensiveness. Emotional destabilization. She was building a case, not in court, but in credibility. She was preparing for the kind of divorce where stories are currency and the one who cries first wins. The therapy sessions weren't about healing. They were about documentation, a strategic stage, a paper trail of emotional misconduct. I didn't confront her. That would have been playing the roles she wrote for me. Instead, I found my own lawyer, quietly. I brought them the folder, the journal pages, the financials. We reviewed our assets, drew up protection clauses, and, most importantly, I froze the joint account the following week. When she asked why the mortgage payment bounced, I told her I'd switched banks. Too many fraud alerts, I said. Thought it was safer. She didn't press, but she didn't smile either. That night, she offered to massage my shoulders while we watched TV. Her hands were warm. Her voice was light, and I let her. Not because I wanted to. Because she still thought I was asleep. Let her try to stage her finale. I was already backstage, rewriting the ending. It was a Wednesday. Midweek felt like the right time. Ordinary enough not to raise suspicion, close enough to the weekend for fallout to spread without containment. I spent the day preparing like a man setting a stage. Everything had to feel normal, predictable, loving. I marinated the lamb the night before, cleaned the house, polished the cutlery she liked, the ones with the narrow handles and the little etching near the base. She used to say they made her feel elegant. Back when we said things to each other that meant something. I set the table with candles, cloth napkins, her favorite wine, aged smoky, rare. I opened it 2 hours before she got home to let it breathe. I needed her to think this was an olive branch, not a blade. She came in just after 6, wind-tossed and flushed from her walk. She paused in the doorway, brow lifting. Wow. What's all this? I smiled. You've been patient with me. I thought I'd return the favor. She softened immediately. That's how I knew the cracks in her conscience hadn't reached the surface yet. She changed quickly, came back in a silk blouse I hadn't seen before. Light perfume, hair tied loose. She looked beautiful. Sharp, composed, gentle. The kind of gentle that hides knives. We sat. Ate. Talked about mundane things, her work, a client who was overstepping, an annoying email thread. I nodded, responded. Played the role I'd been assigned one last time. Then dessert. I cleared the plates, poured a final glass, and placed a small leather folder beside her plate. She looked at it, then at me. What's this? Something to help you align your narratives, I said quietly. She opened it. The birthday card was first, the one addressed to L. in her handwriting. Beneath that, the separation proposal, complete with her bullet point strategy for phasing me out of my own life. Then a page from her journal, with my own words highlighted like evidence in a prosecutor's closing argument. And finally, the check, drawn from my personal account, payable to a local divorce attorney, in her name, signed by me. Her fingers tightened around the paper. She didn't speak. I leaned back, let the silence wrap the room like insulation. After a long minute, she looked up. Her face was carefully neutral, but her eyes were wide. "This is cruel," she said, almost whispered. I nodded. "It is. But so was staging a mental health ambush to build a narrative. So was planning your exit 3 months before the conversation." She blinked. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked smaller now, like the room had grown while she'd shrunk. "I wasn't going to blindside you," she said finally, voice cracking just enough. "I was trying to make it manageable. Thought if we eased into it." "You were scripting me," I said. Calm. Cold. Like a character. Writing journal notes in third person. Practicing therapy phrases until I sounded like a case study. She swallowed hard, her fingers curling around the base of her wine glass, but she didn't lift it. Her hand just hovered there, suspended in uncertainty. I watched her and said calmly, "This wasn't punishment. It's accountability. The emotional kind." The only response was silence, broken only by the faint clink of wax shifting in the candle holder. After a long moment, she glanced up, her voice barely audible. "Why now?" I leaned back, steady. "Because now you don't control the narrative," I said. "Now you just live in it." She turned her eyes to the check resting on the table, as if trying to read a future in the signature. "I never wanted this to turn ugly," she murmured, almost more to herself than to me. My tone stayed even as I met her gaze. "Then maybe you shouldn't have tried to make me the villain of your clean exit." That was when it broke, the performance. The soft-spoken mask she'd perfected. Her eyes filled. Not dramatically, quietly. Controlled. "I was scared," she said. "Scared you'd get angry. Scared I'd lose control. Scared you'd make it worse." "I didn't get angry," I said. "I got smart." We sat in that quiet for what felt like forever. She reached for the check, folded it once, then again. "You already hired someone," she said. Not a question. I nodded. She stood slowly, folded the folder closed, and said nothing as she walked down the hallway and shut the door behind her. I didn't follow. I blew out the candles, cleared the plates, washed every dish by hand. When I went to bed, she was already asleep on the far edge. Or pretending to be. I lay beside her, staring at the ceiling, the silence between us louder than any fight could have been. She thought she was playing chess, but I was the one who set the board. The fallout didn't come as an explosion. It came like a slow collapse, quiet, inevitable, structural. She moved into the guest room 2 days later. No big scene. Just took her pillow and a stack of folded clothes, left her sent behind like a forgotten excuse. We spoke little. Logistics mostly. Meals, mail, messages from the lawyer. But outside the house, things began to slip in ways she hadn't anticipated. The therapist, Marlene, wasn't just someone she'd found through a quick Google search. I discovered that through a mutual contact in legal circles. Marlene had been seeing her off the books. Payments routed through a shell account. One linked, accidentally or arrogantly, to her father's consulting firm. I filed a formal complaint with the state board. That wasn't vengeance. That was exposure. I didn't accuse. I documented. Attached the journal entries, the role-play notes, the session summaries she'd left lying around. I let the facts speak louder than any accusation could. A month later, Marlene's license was placed under review. The real twist, though, came from Liam Hartwell, her narrative coach, her emotional guru, her whispered escape hatch. Turns out, he was married. Not in the process of separation. Not in some open trial of enlightened detachment. Married. With a brand built on transparent communication. It took only one message to his wife. A single email, stripped of malice, just a set of forwarded exchanges and calendar invites with her name attached. I didn't need to embellish. I didn't even need a reply. But I got one. "Thank you for your clarity," she wrote. 2 weeks later, his speaking gigs began drying up. Podcasts pulled episodes. Clients ghosted him. The platform he built on radical honesty began to crumble under the weight of his own curated lies. Mutual friends started asking questions. I never gave them drama. Just a quiet phrase I repeated when pressed. Sometimes people confuse control with clarity. I chose clarity. The divorce proceedings were cleaner than I expected. She didn't fight. Maybe she didn't have the energy, or maybe she knew I had too much. We split the assets fairly. No alimony. No courtroom scenes. But the silence between us was permanent. After the paperwork, I moved out. Took only what mattered. She didn't stop me. Didn't hug me. Didn't cry. Just stood in the doorway like she was watching a memory dissolve. Thank you for watching. Bye.